I can help you walk again. He turned and looked at the little girl standing beside the bench. You think you can help me walk again? He asked gently. She nodded. Yes. If you practice with me every day. He gave a tired smile and shook his head slowly. The doctors can't even help me. They say my legs are getting weaker every day. They told me maybe the muscles are failing. I used to run every morning. Now I can't even stand up without help. I know, the girl said calmly, but I can help you try. Slowly. My grandpa taught me. He looked at her, curious now. Your grandpa is a doctor? He is a medicine man, she said. He fixes bones, muscles, and people who cannot walk well. He taught me how to make the blood move in the legs. Before he could respond, she pointed to his legs. Can I touch your leg? He hesitated, then nodded. All right. She placed her small hands on his calf and began to massage slowly, pressing gently, then rubbing upward. Her hands were warm and patient, not rushed like the therapists at the clinic. You have to make the blood move, she said while working. When blood moves, the leg wakes up. When the leg wakes up, it remembers how to stand. He watched her, unsure whether this was real help or just a child trying to be kind. But after a few minutes, he felt a faint tingling in his leg, like tiny pins under the skin. Do you feel that? She asked. He frowned slightly. Maybe, a little. She nodded like that was exactly the answer she expected. That means the leg is not dead. It is just weak. He looked down at his legs for a long moment. What if I practice every day? He asked quietly. And I still can't walk? What if nothing changes? The girl stopped massaging and looked up at him. Her voice was very calm when she answered, Then at least you know you tried. My grandpa says not walking is bad, but not trying is worse. He let out a slow breath. That sounded like something an old man would say, not a child. She stood up and moved the wheelchair a little closer to the bench. We try to stand now, she said. He looked surprised. Now? She nodded. Yes. Slowly. I help you. You're too small to help me, he said. I don't have to carry you, she replied. I just help you try. Put your hands on the bench. He looked at the wooden bench, then at his legs. His heart began to beat faster. He had not tried to stand like this in a long time without a therapist holding him. Slowly, she said again. He placed both hands on the bench and pushed down. His arms trembled. His legs shook badly, like they didn't belong to him. He lifted himself slightly, then dropped back into the chair. Again, she said. He tried again. This time he pushed longer. His legs shook hard, but for a brief moment, he was up not fully straight, but not sitting either. I'm standing, he said, surprised, breathing harder. Yes, she said softly. Your legs are still there. He slowly lowered himself back into the wheelchair, his heart pounding like he had just run a race. After a moment, he looked at her again. Why are my legs getting weaker then? The doctors said I should be getting better, not worse. The girl became very serious again. She looked around, then leaned a little closer and spoke quietly. You have to stop taking the white pills, she said. Those pills are making your legs weak. He stared at her. That's medicine. It's supposed to help me. She shook her head. No, that medicine is making you worse. How do you know? He asked. She reached into the small pocket of her dress and carefully took out a tiny clear plastic bag. Inside was a single white pill. She reached into the small pocket of her dress and carefully took out a tiny clear plastic bag. Inside was a single white pill. I found this, she said. One day your fiancé was putting medicine into her bag. She was in a hurry and one pill fell on the floor. She didn't see it. I picked it up. He looked at the pill in the bag, his chest suddenly tight. I took it to my grandpa, she continued. He looked at it and said, This is not medicine to make legs strong. He said this medicine makes muscles weak if you take it for a long time. He said if someone keeps taking this, their legs will slowly stop working. The world around him seemed to go quiet again. He told me, the girl said, her voice very soft now. If the man keeps taking this medicine, one day he will not be able to stand at all. He looked at the pill for a long time without touching it. That's That's not possible, he said, but his voice was no longer strong. I also heard her talking on the phone, the girl said. She said, in a few months he won't be able to walk. After the wedding, everything will be under my control. I don't understand everything, but I know that is bad. He closed his eyes for a moment. For months, he had trusted the routine. The pills every morning, the pills every night, always given to him by the same person, always with a gentle smile, always with the same words, "This will help you get better." When a strong man cannot stand, the girl said quietly, someone else can stand in his place. He opened his eyes and looked at her. If I stop taking the pills, he said slowly, and I practice every day with you, do you really think I can walk again? She nodded without any doubt. Yes, but you have to be brave, because the person giving you the pills will not want you to get better. He looked at the little girl and said softly, all right, tomorrow, we try again. The girl smiled, a small but certain smile. Tomorrow we stand longer, she said. And one day, you will walk. The next morning, the house was very quiet. He was already awake when he heard her footsteps in the hallway. For the first time in months, he did not feel like a patient waiting for a nurse. He felt like a man preparing for something important, something dangerous. On the small table beside his bed sat a glass of water, an empty tissue, and a plan. At exactly 7, she opened the door and walked in with the same gentle smile and the same white bottle in her hand. Good morning, she said softly. It's time for your medicine. He looked at the pills in her hand and then at her face. For a moment, he wondered how long she had been planning this. Weeks? Months? Since the accident, he took the pills from her hand and put them into his mouth. He lifted the glass of water and swallowed, tilting his head back slightly. She watched him carefully. She always watched to make sure he swallowed. Good, she said. Your legs will get stronger if you keep taking your medicine and rest more. The doctor said recovery takes time. He nodded slightly, pretending to be tired. I know. She adjusted the blanket over his legs. I'll be downstairs making a few calls. The doctor will come later this week. And don't forget, we need to finalize the wedding guest list tonight. All right, he said. When she left the room and closed the door, he stayed still for 10 seconds, listening to her footsteps fade down the hallway. Then he quickly rolled to the bathroom, leaned over the sink, and spat the pills into his hand. He wrapped them in the tissue and rolled back into the bedroom. Doctor, he said quietly. The closet door opened slowly, and a man stepped out. He was in his late 50s, wearing a simple jacket, not a white coat. He was not the doctor she had hired. He was a private physician, an old friend of his lawyer, a man who had agreed to come quietly and not leave any records. You have them? The doctor asked. He handed over the tissue. The doctor opened it carefully and looked at the 2 white pills in his palm. Can you test them? He asked. The doctor nodded. He took out a small testing kit from his bag, something that looked more like a travel tool than hospital equipment. He scraped a tiny amount from the pill, dropped liquid onto it, and waited. They both watched in silence. After a minute, the doctor's face became very serious. This is not a recovery medication, the doctor said quietly. This is a strong muscle relaxant. In high doses, over time, it causes muscle weakness, loss of balance, and eventually the patient can't stand without assistance. He felt his hands slowly curl into fists. If you keep taking this every day, the doctor continued, your legs will become so weak that you will permanently need a wheelchair, and any other doctor will believe it's a medical condition, not poisoning, because the symptoms look natural. The room felt smaller suddenly, so the little girl was right, he said quietly. The doctor looked at him. What little girl? I'll explain later, he said. If I stop taking this now, can my legs recover? The doctor nodded slowly. If the nerves are not permanently damaged, yes. But you need movement, exercise, blood circulation, and you must stop taking this immediately. He let out a long breath. Thank you, he said quietly. The doctor packed his things. Be careful, he said before leaving through the back hallway. If someone is giving you this on purpose, then this is not just a medical problem. This is something else. I know, he replied. That afternoon, he told her he wanted fresh air and asked to be taken to the backyard instead of the park. The backyard? She asked. Why? I'm tired of people seeing me like this, he said, gesturing to the wheelchair. I just want some privacy. She looked at him for a moment, then nodded. All right. But don't try to stand by yourself. You could fall. I won't, he said. The backyard was large and quiet, with a wide stone patio and a small garden behind it. The air smelled like wet grass and pine. The driver rolled him out and then went back inside the house. He waited. 2 minutes later, a small figure appeared from the side of the house, moving quietly along the fence. You came, the girl said. I came, he replied. She walked up to him and looked at his face carefully. Did you stop taking the pills? Yes, he said, and I had a doctor test them. You were right. They make the muscles weak. She nodded, not surprised. My grandpa was very sure. He looked at her. You might have saved my life. She didn't respond to that. Instead, she pointed to the stone patio. Today we try to stand and take one step. One step? He said. She nodded. One step is how walking starts. He rolled the wheelchair closer to the stone bench. She stood in front of him, very serious now. Put your hands here, she said, and stand slowly. He pushed down on the bench and lifted himself. His legs shook, but he was standing. The sunlight felt different when he was not sitting. Good, she said softly. Now don't sit. Try to move one foot. I might fall, he said. I am here, she said, and the bench is here. You are not alone. He moved his right foot a few inches forward. His legs trembled violently, and he grabbed the bench harder, but his foot moved. That's one step, she said, smiling. He breathed heavily. I haven't done that in months. Tomorrow you do 2 steps, she said. Then 3, then more. He slowly sat back down in the wheelchair, exhausted but wide awake inside. He looked at the big house behind them. Then he looked back at the small girl standing in front of him. If she finds out I stopped taking the pills, he said quietly, everything will change. The girl nodded. Yes, she said. But if you don't stop, nothing will ever change. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories about hope, courage, and justice. He looked at his legs, then at the ground where his foot had just taken one small step. That night, he sat alone in his study. The lights off, the city of Seattle glowing faintly through the tall glass windows. The wheelchair was turned slightly toward the desk, but he wasn't working. In front of him were 3 things: his phone, a legal pad, and a small, clear plastic bag with a single white pill inside. He kept looking at the pill like it might change shape if he stared long enough. For 6 months, he had believed he was getting sick, that his body was failing him, that life had simply decided to take away the one thing he loved most: movement, freedom, strength. But now a different idea had taken root in his mind, and it would not leave. Someone was not helping him recover. Someone was making sure he didn't. He picked up his phone and made a call. I need access to the house security cameras, he said when the man on the other end answered. All of them, especially the kitchen, the hallway outside my bedroom, and the downstairs bar. I want the recordings from the last 3 months. Is there a problem? The man asked. I don't know yet, he replied. But I think I've been very blind in my own house. He ended the call and leaned back in the chair, staring into the dark room. For the first time in his life, he was not afraid of losing money. He was afraid of losing his life while everyone called it an illness. The next morning, the routine continued exactly as before. She walked in with the pills and the glass of water, her voice soft, her face calm. Good morning, she said. Did you sleep better? A little, he replied. That's good, she said, shaking 2 pills into her hand. Here, take these. He took the pills and pretended to swallow again. She watched, satisfied, then left the room to take a phone call. As soon as the door closed, he rolled quickly to his desk, opened the drawer, and placed the pills beside the other ones he had saved. The small pile of white pills was starting to grow. A few hours later, his head of security arrived quietly through the back entrance with a laptop and a hard drive. They sat in the study with the curtains closed while the footage loaded. Tell me what I'm looking for, the security chief said. He pointed at the screen. 3 weeks ago. Kitchen camera. Late evening. Around 9 p.m. The footage appeared in black and white first, then switched to color. The kitchen was quiet. Lights on. Empty. They watched in silence. At 9:12 p.m., she walked into the kitchen holding 2 bottles. She looked around once, like people do when they don't want to be seen, then opened one bottle and poured some pills into the other bottle. She shook it, closed it, and placed it back on the counter. Then she picked up her phone and made a call. The security footage had no sound, but he could read her lips just enough to understand one sentence. In a few months, he won't be able to walk at all. His hand slowly tightened on the armrest of the wheelchair. The video continued. She laughed a little, said something else, then picked up both bottles and left the kitchen. The room was completely silent when the video ended. The security chief looked at him carefully. "Do you want me to copy this footage?" he asked. "Yes," he said quietly. "And make 3 copies. One for my lawyer, one for me, and one somewhere safe." The man nodded, understood. After he left, the house felt different. The walls looked the same. The furniture was the same. The photographs were the same. But now he knew something he had not known before. He was not living in a home. He was living inside a plan. That afternoon, he told her he wanted to spend time in the backyard again. "You really enjoy the backyard lately?" she said, watching him carefully. "It's quiet," he replied. "I do a lot of thinking out there." "That's good," she said. "Just don't try to stand on your own. I don't want you to fall." "I know," he said. In the backyard, the air was cool, and the stone patio still held a little warmth from the sun. He waited only a minute before she appeared from the side path again. He looked at her and said quietly, "You were right." She studied his face. "You saw it?" "Yes," he said. "The cameras. In the kitchen. She changed the pills. I saw it with my own eyes." She didn't look surprised. She just nodded slowly. "My grandpa says when people do bad things for money, they always think no one is watching." He let out a slow breath. "I built this house. I installed those cameras. And still, I was the last person to see what was happening inside my own kitchen." She walked closer and looked at his legs. "Then we don't have much time," she said. "You have to get stronger before the wedding." He nodded. "The wedding is in 3 weeks." She thought for a moment, then said, "Then every day matters now." He rolled closer to the stone bench and placed his hands on it. "Yesterday I did 2 steps," he said. "Today we try more." He pushed himself up. His legs shook, but they held him. He stood there, breathing slowly, feeling the muscles working, feeling the effort, feeling something returning that he thought he had lost. "Okay," she said softly. 1 step. He moved his right foot forward. Another step. He moved his left foot forward. Again. This time, he managed 3 small steps while holding the bench. His legs were shaking badly now, and sweat formed on his forehead. But he was standing, moving, fighting. He sat down again, breathing hard. "She wanted me in this chair," he said quietly. "She planned it. The pills, the wedding, everything." The girl looked at him and said something very calmly. "Then you stand up at the wedding." He looked at her. "You stand up in front of everyone," she continued. "And you show them you are not weak. And you show them what she did." He leaned back in the wheelchair and looked at the big house behind them, the tall windows reflecting the gray sky. "For months, I thought I was losing my legs," he said slowly. Then he looked down at his feet again. "But now I understand the truth." He lifted his eyes and looked straight ahead, his voice quiet but hard. "I was not losing my legs. I was losing my life." The house had never felt this quiet before. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind of quiet that makes you aware of every sound, the ticking clock in the hallway, the low hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the faint sound of her voice somewhere in the house talking on the phone, speaking softly, carefully, like someone who was always negotiating something. He sat in his study with the laptop open in front of him, watching the security footage again. The image on the screen showed the kitchen counter, the pill bottles, her hands, calm and practiced as she poured pills from one bottle into another. She didn't look nervous. She didn't look guilty. She looked organized, focused, like someone following a plan she had thought about for a long time. He paused the video on the exact moment when the pills fell from one bottle into the other. 2 bottles. Same color, same size. One label facing the camera, one turned away. He zoomed in as much as possible. The image became grainy, but he could still see enough. The bottle she poured from did not have his name on it. He leaned back slowly in his chair. "So that's how you did it," he said quietly to himself. "Not poison, not something obvious, just something that made me weaker and weaker until I disappeared on paper." He closed the laptop and picked up the phone. "Get me my lawyer," he said. "And I need a financial report. Everything that has been moved, transferred, or signed in the last 6 months. Every document with my name on it. Every power of attorney. Every medical authorization. Everything." "Yes, sir," the voice on the other end said. When he ended the call, he sat there for a long time without moving. On the wall across from him were framed photographs, marathon finish lines, mountain climbs, a younger version of himself covered in sweat and smiling at the camera. Legs strong, shoulders straight, eyes clear. He looked at those photos and then looked down at the wheelchair. "They didn't just try to take my legs," he said quietly. "They tried to take the man in those pictures." That afternoon, he went to the backyard again. This time, he didn't wait for long. She was already there near the garden, watering the plants for her mother, who worked in the house. When she saw him, she put the hose down and walked over quickly. "You look different today," she said. "I saw the video," he replied. She nodded once. Then, "Now you know." "Yes," he said. "Now I know." He rolled to the bench and placed his hands on it. "Today we try without holding so tight," he said. She stood close to him, not touching him, just ready in case he fell. "Slowly," she said. He pushed himself up. His legs shook, but not as violently as before. He stayed standing for several seconds, breathing slowly, focusing on balance. "Good," she said. "Now try one step without pulling the bench." He hesitated. "If I fall, this will be a very embarrassing story." "If you fall," she said calmly, "then we stand again." He took a small step forward without dragging himself on the bench. His leg trembled, but it held him. Then another small step. He was not walking yet, but he was moving. He sat down again, breathing hard but smiling slightly. "I had a meeting this morning," he said. "With the lawyer?" she asked. He looked at her, surprised. "You're very good at guessing. My grandpa says when something bad is happening, you don't just fix your body," she said. "You fix your situation." He nodded slowly. "My lawyer found something. 2 months after my accident, she had me sign some documents. She said they were medical forms, insurance forms, but they were also financial control documents, temporary decision authority, access to accounts, voting rights in the company if I was medically unable to perform my duties." The girl listened quietly. "If the doctors say I cannot walk and cannot work," he continued, "then she becomes the person who makes decisions for my company, for my money, for everything." The girl looked toward the big house. "So the chair is not just a chair," she said. "No," he replied. "The chair is control." They were quiet for a moment. "The wedding is in 3 weeks," he said. "After the wedding, it will be even harder to stop her legally. Everything will look normal. A wife taking care of her sick husband. No one will question it." "Then you don't stop her after the wedding," the girl said. "You stop her at the wedding." He looked at her again, the same way he had looked at her the first day in the park, like he was looking at someone much older than she appeared. "You really think like a general planning a battle," he said. "My grandpa says if someone digs a hole for you," she replied, "the worst thing you can do is politely step into it." He laughed quietly, the first real laugh he had made in months. "I spent my whole life building things," he said. "Companies, deals, investments. I thought that was hard. But this is different. This is not business," she said. "This is survival." He looked at his legs again. "Then tomorrow," he said slowly, "we don't just practice standing." She tilted her head. "What do we practice?" He looked at the long stone path that ran along the garden. "We practice walking," he said. That evening, back inside the house, she sat across from him at the dining table. going over wedding plans, guest lists, flowers, music. She looked happy, relaxed, confident. "We should practice your vows," she said with a warm smile. "You'll be sitting, of course, but it will still be beautiful." He looked at her for a moment and then nodded. "Yes," he said calmly. "Beautiful." But in his mind, he was not thinking about vows. He was thinking about standing up in front of everyone, standing up before she could take everything, standing up before the chair became his life forever. The next few days settled into a routine that looked normal from the outside and felt like preparation for war on the inside. Every morning, she brought the pills and the water. Every morning, he pretended to swallow them. Every morning, he waited until she left the room, then got rid of the pills and hid the evidence. He began to keep them in a small metal box in his desk drawer, lining them up in neat rows. White, round, silent. Enough pills to steal a man's legs, one day at a time. Every afternoon, he went to the backyard. From the kitchen window, it probably looked like a sick man getting fresh air. A man in a wheelchair, sitting near the garden, watching the trees, trying to accept a smaller life. But behind the stone bench, where the camera from the house couldn't see clearly, a different story was happening. "Again," she said. He pushed himself up from the bench. His legs were still weak, but they were changing. The first few days, they had trembled like they belonged to someone else. Now the shaking was still there. But underneath the shaking there was strength trying to come back. "Stand straight," she said. "Don't look at your feet. Look forward." He straightened his back and looked ahead at the fence. "Now one step," she said. He moved his right foot forward. It was still slow, still unsteady, but it was a real step. Now the other one. He moved his left foot. 2 steps. Again. He took a 3rd step, then reached for the bench and sat down, breathing hard. "That's 3, he said. She shook her head. "That's not 3, she said. "That's walking." He looked at her, then down at his legs again. "It doesn't feel like walking. My grandpa says walking is just falling and catching yourself again and again," she said. "You are already doing that." He leaned back, catching his breath. The air smelled like grass and wet soil. Somewhere inside the house, he could hear a door close and faint music playing. A normal house. A normal afternoon. If someone walked by, they would see nothing unusual. But he knew the truth now, and once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. "I met my lawyer again this morning," he said. She sat down on the stone step, listening. "He found more documents," he continued. "Medical authorization forms, financial control forms. If 2 doctors declare that I am physically unable to manage my company, she becomes the temporary decision maker. If my condition doesn't improve after the marriage, temporary can become permanent." The girl was quiet for a moment. "So she doesn't need to hurt you fast," she said. "She just needs to hurt you slowly." He looked at her. "Yes, slowly is cleaner. Slowly looks like bad luck." She nodded. "My grandpa says if someone pushes you off a cliff, everyone sees the murderer. But if someone moves the ground under your feet 1 inch every day, nobody sees anything." He was quiet after that, thinking about that sentence. Move the ground 1 inch every day. That was exactly what had happened to him. First the injury, then the pills, then the cane, then the walker, then the chair, then the documents, then the wedding. All very reasonable, all very explainable, all very legal. "Tomorrow," he said slowly, "my lawyer is bringing a financial investigator. We are going to follow the money. If she is planning to control everything, the money will move before the wedding. Not after." The girl nodded. "People who plan big lies always prepare the money first," she said. He smiled slightly. "You talk like someone who has seen a lot of bad people." She shrugged a little. "I have seen people who are tired and people who are hungry. Hungry people do bad things sometimes." He thought about that for a moment. "There are 2 kinds of hungry," he said. "People who are hungry because they have nothing, and people who are hungry because nothing is enough." She looked at him and said quietly, "She is the second kind." He didn't answer, but he knew she was right. "Let's try again," she said, standing up. This time, walk to me. She moved a few steps away from him on the stone path. Walk to me, she repeated. He stood up slowly, balanced himself, then took one step, then another. His legs were shaking, but they were holding him. He focused on her, on the small distance between them. 3 steps, 4 steps. On the 5th step, his leg almost gave out, and he reached forward quickly. She stepped closer, and he caught her shoulder lightly to steady himself. I'm sorry, he said, breathing hard. I almost fell, but you didn't, she said. You walked. He looked back at the wheelchair. It was only a few steps away, but it felt like it was in a different world. I had a dream last night, he said suddenly. What dream? She asked. I dreamed I was running again, he said. Not fast. Just running. And in the dream, I wasn't even happy. I was just normal. And when I woke up and saw the chair, I realized something. What? She asked. The worst part about losing my legs was not the pain, he said. It was that everyone started making decisions for me. Where I go, what I eat, what I sign, what I take, what I believe about my own body. He looked at his legs again. If I don't stand up soon, he said quietly, I won't just lose my company. I will lose the right to decide anything about my own life. The girl looked at him very seriously. Then you don't just stand up for walking, she said. You stand up for your life. He nodded slowly. For my life, he repeated. Inside the house, through the tall glass windows, he could see her moving around the kitchen, talking on the phone, probably planning the wedding, the flowers, the seating, the music. A perfect wedding, a perfect plan. He looked away from the house and took another slow step forward on the stone path. Then another, and another. Each step was small, but each step was a decision. And for the first time in a long time, the decisions were his again. 3 days before the final wedding guest list was due, the financial investigator came to the house through the back entrance, just like the private doctor had. He sat in the study again, the curtains half closed, the wheelchair turned toward the desk, a legal pad in front of him. On the desk were copies of bank statements, investment reports, and company share transfers from the last 6 months. The investigator, a quiet man with gray hair and thin glasses, opened his laptop and spoke in a calm, professional voice. I'll explain this simply, he said, because what's happening here is actually very organized. I assumed it would be, he replied. The investigator turned the screen so he could see. About 5 months ago, several small companies began buying shares of your company. Nothing unusual at first. It happens all the time. But when we looked closer, those companies are all connected. Connected how? He asked. They are all owned by the same holding group, the investigator said. And that holding group was created 4 months ago. Who owns the holding group? He asked, though he already felt like he knew the answer. The investigator clicked another file and turned the screen again. Her name was on the document. Not directly, not in a way that was obvious to the public, but through layers of legal structures, shell companies, and proxies, the trail led to her. She's positioning herself to become one of the largest voting shareholders in your company, the investigator said. If you are declared medically unable to run the company, and she already controls enough shares, she effectively controls everything. He sat very still, looking at the documents. So the pills weaken me, he said slowly. The doctors declare me unfit. She gains control of my voting rights temporarily, but she already owns enough shares to make sure temporary becomes permanent. The investigator nodded. That's what it looks like. And the marriage? He asked. That makes everything cleaner. The investigator replied. Less suspicion, more legal access, more sympathy from the board. A wife taking care of her disabled husband. No one questions that story. He let out a slow breath and looked down at his hands. For months, he said quietly, I thought I was unlucky. The investigator didn't say anything. But this isn't luck, he continued. This is a strategy. Yes, the investigator said. It is. After the investigator left, he sat alone in the study for a long time. The house was quiet again. He could hear her voice somewhere downstairs, talking about flower arrangements and seating charts, her tone warm and excited, like someone planning a beautiful future. He rolled to the window and looked out at the backyard. That afternoon, he went outside again. She was already there near the garden wall, waiting. You walked more yesterday, she said when she saw him. Yes, he replied. And today I found out why she needs me in that chair. He told her everything in simple words, the shares, the companies, the control, the plan that was much bigger than just a wedding. The girl listened without interrupting. So it's not just about taking care of you, she said when he finished. It's about taking everything. Yes, he said, everything. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Then you don't just stand up at the wedding. He looked at her. What do you mean? You stand up, she said. And you tell the truth in front of everyone. Not just that she hurt your legs, but that she planned everything. He leaned back in the wheelchair slightly. My lawyer said the same thing. If we go to court quietly, it will take years. But if we show the board, the investors, and everyone at once, she won't have time to fix the story. The girl nodded. Bad people are strong when things are quiet, she said. They are weak when everyone can see. He looked at her for a long moment. You know, he said, most people in my world have expensive degrees, big offices, and important titles. But the clearest advice I've heard in the last 6 months has come from you. She shrugged a little. My grandpa says truth is simple. People just like to make it complicated when they are hiding something. He smiled slightly. Your grandpa is a very dangerous man. She smiled back a little. He just grows plants. They moved to the stone path again. Today we walk farther, she said. He stood up slowly. His legs were still weak, but now they obeyed him. Not perfectly, not strongly, but they obeyed. 1 step, she said. He took 1 step. Another. He took another. They moved slowly along the stone path. 5 steps, then 6. On the 7th step, his leg trembled badly, and he stopped. Rest, she said. He sat down on the bench, breathing hard but smiling. 6 months ago, I ran a marathon, he said. Today, I am proud of 7 steps. She looked at him and said, 7 steps in the right direction is better than 1,000 steps in the wrong one. He laughed quietly. I'm going to remember that. He looked back at the house again, at the large windows reflecting the gray sky. In that house, he said slowly, she thinks I am a sick man in a chair. She thinks I am scared. She thinks I am dependent on her. He looked down at his legs, then back at the stone path where he had just walked. But every day, that story is becoming less true. He turned to the girl and said quietly, at the wedding, there will be investors, board members, lawyers, friends, everyone. She expects to push me in that chair, say beautiful words, sign papers, and walk away with everything. He paused, then continued, but instead, I am going to stand up. The girl nodded, not surprised. And when I stand up, he said, his voice calm and steady now, I'm not just standing up from a chair. He looked toward the house one more time. I'm standing up from the biggest mistake of my life. The house grew busier as the wedding approached. But the busier the house became, the more invisible he felt. People came and went with fabric samples, flower catalogs, menu options, music lists. The dining room table was covered in papers, color palettes, and guest lists written in neat handwriting that was not his. He sat at the table in his wheelchair while she and the wedding planner talked about centerpieces and lighting like they were planning a royal ceremony. This will be beautiful, the wedding planner said. When you come down the aisle, everyone will already be emotional. And when you say your vows from the chair, there won't be a dry eye in the room. He noticed the way she said it when you say your vows from the chair like it was already decided, like it was part of the decoration, part of the story they were selling to the world. A beautiful, tragic story. A strong woman marrying a broken man. A loyal woman taking care of a man who lost everything. A love story. He almost admired how perfect the story sounded. That night, after everyone left, she poured him a glass of wine and sat across from him. I know this hasn't been easy for you, she said softly, but after the wedding, things will be calmer. We'll hire more help. You won't have to worry about the company anymore. You can just focus on getting better. Not worry about the company anymore. He looked at her and realized that she had been telling him the plan all along, just in gentle words, soft sentences, loving lies. And what if I don't get better? He asked quietly. She reached across the table and took his hand. Then I'll take care of you, she said. That's what love is. He held her gaze for a few seconds and then smiled slightly. You're very good to me, he said. She smiled back, satisfied, and squeezed his hand gently. You saved me once, she said. Now it's my turn to take care of you. If she noticed anything different in his eyes, she didn't show it. The next afternoon, in the backyard, he walked farther than ever before. The girl stood a few steps ahead of him on the stone path. Walk to me, she said. He stood up without using the bench this time, pushing up from the wheelchair arms and finding his balance. His legs trembled, but he stayed upright. One step, she said. He took one step. Again, another step. By the fifth step, his legs were shaking hard, but he kept going. 6 steps, 7, 8. He reached her and lightly touched her shoulder to steady himself, breathing hard but smiling in disbelief. I walked 8 steps, he said. She shook her head slightly. You didn't walk 8 steps, she said. You took 8 steps. Walking is when you don't count anymore. He laughed quietly. All right, he said. Then today, I took 8 steps. He sat down on the bench, breathing heavily, his legs aching, but it was the kind of pain that meant something was coming back to life. The investigator found the money, he said after a moment. She sat beside him, listening. She moved money into those companies that bought my shares, he continued. She used other people's names, but the lawyer says we can prove it leads back to her. Slowly, quietly, she was building control. The girl looked toward the house again. She must think she is very smart, she said. She is smart, he replied. That's what makes this dangerous. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't anger. This was a plan. He watched the windows of the house. From outside, it looked peaceful, beautiful, safe. My lawyer asked me a question this morning, he said. He asked me when I first realized something was wrong. Not with my legs, with her. He was quiet for a long moment. I think, he said slowly, it was not when I got sick. It was when I stopped being allowed to make my own decisions. When someone starts telling you what you are allowed to know, allowed to sign, allowed to decide, that's when you should be afraid. The girl nodded. My grandpa says, when someone slowly takes your choices away, they are not helping you. They are training you. Training you for what? He asked. Training you to obey, she said. He leaned back and looked up at the sky. Gray clouds moving slowly, like time passing. The board of directors will all be at the wedding, he said. Investors too. Important people. If I stand up there, in front of all of them, and show the video, the financial records, the pills, she won't be able to talk her way out of it. The girl looked at him. Are you scared? She asked. He thought about that question carefully before answering. Yes, he said. Not because of her, because of myself. She frowned slightly. What do you mean? I built my life on being strong, he said, on making good decisions, on seeing problems before they happen. And still, I let this happen to me. I trusted the wrong person. I signed papers without reading carefully because I was tired. I took pills without asking questions because I was afraid. I gave someone control because I didn't want to fight while I was in pain. He looked down at his hands. That's the part that scares me, he said quietly. Not that she betrayed me, but that I helped her do it by giving up control. The girl was quiet for a moment, then she said something very softly. My grandpa says trusting someone is not a mistake, she said. The mistake is when you keep trusting after you see the truth. He looked at her and nodded slowly. Then I guess I'm done making that mistake, he said. He placed his hands on the bench and stood up again, even though his legs were already tired. What are you doing? She asked. Walking again, he said. You should rest, she said. He shook his head. No, he said. Because every day I sit in that chair, she gets closer to winning. And every step I take, I get closer to ending this. He took one step, then another. Slow, painful, shaking steps along the stone path behind the house, where no one inside could see clearly. Inside the house, she was probably choosing flowers and music for the wedding. Outside the house, the man she thought she had already defeated was learning how to walk again. By the time the wedding was only 10 days away, The house no longer felt like his home. It felt like a stage being prepared for a performance. And he was the main prop. Every room was full of movement. Boxes arrived with suits, decorations, wine, gifts. The wedding planner walked through the house like a director, pointing at tables, measuring spaces, talking about lighting and camera angles. Everything had to look perfect. Everything had to look like a beautiful love story. And in that love story, he was the man in the chair. That morning, she came into his room with the pills as usual. Her routine never changed. Smile, water, pills, gentle voice. "Only 10 more days," she said cheerfully. "Are you nervous?" "A little," he replied. "That's normal," she said. "It's a big day, but everything is ready. You don't have to worry about anything. I've taken care of it all. I've taken care of it all." He looked at the pills in his hand, then pretended to swallow them again. She watched, satisfied, then walked to the window and opened the curtains. "It's a beautiful day," she said. "Maybe later we can sit in the garden. You like the garden now?" "Yes," he said. "I like the garden." After she left, he took the pills from under his tongue and placed them in the metal box in his drawer. The box was almost half full now, enough poison to build a wheelchair. That afternoon, he went to the backyard again. The girl was waiting near the stone path, like always. She didn't ask questions anymore when she saw his face. She could read his expression now the way a doctor reads a chart. "You are walking better," she said. "I am," he replied. "And we are running out of time." He stood up from the wheelchair without using the bench now. It still took effort, but he could do it. He balanced himself, then took a step toward her, then another, then another. 10 steps. He stopped, breathing hard but still standing. 10, he said. She nodded. "Tomorrow. More." He sat down on the bench, wiping sweat from his forehead. "My lawyer is preparing everything," he said. "The video from the kitchen, the financial records, the pill report from the doctor. Everything." She sat beside him quietly. "He said something interesting," he continued. "He said the law moves slowly, but truth can move very fast if the right people see it at the same time." "The wedding," she said. "Yes," he said. "Everyone will be there. Board members, investors, friends, press. If we show the truth there, she won't be able to control the story." He looked at his legs again. "But for that plan to work," he said quietly, "I have to walk in there." The girl nodded. "Then we practice walking, not just steps." He looked at the long stone path again. "All right," he said. "Today we don't count steps. Today we walk to the tree." The tree was about 20 steps away. He stood up slowly and started walking. One step, another. His legs trembled, but he kept going. He focused on the tree, on the feeling of his feet touching the ground, on balance, on breathing. Halfway there, his leg nearly gave out, and he grabbed the back of a garden chair. "Rest a moment," she said. He stood there, holding the chair, breathing slowly. "Do you want to stop?" she asked. He shook his head. "No," he said. "If I stop now, I'll still be the man in the chair in 10 days. He pushed himself forward again, step by step, slow and uneven, but moving. When he finally reached the tree, he put his hand on the trunk and closed his eyes for a second. "I made it," he said quietly. She smiled. "Yes, you did." He turned around and looked back at the wheelchair near the bench. It looked far away now. 10 days ago," he said, "that chair was my life." He looked down at his legs. Now it's just a chair. That evening, back inside the house, she was sitting with her laptop, looking at seating arrangements. "I put the board members at the front tables," she said, "and the investors near the stage so they can see the ceremony clearly. The photographer will be on the left side, so when you're sitting, the light will be better on your face. When you're sitting," he nodded slowly. "You've thought of everything," she smiled. "I have to. This is the most important day of our lives." He looked at her for a long moment and then said quietly, "Yes, it is." Later that night, alone in his study, he opened the metal box again and looked at the pills inside. Then he opened another folder, the one with the printed screenshots from the security cameras, then the financial documents, then the doctor's report. Piece by piece, The truth was sitting on his desk. For months, he had been losing strength, losing control, losing his place in his own life. But now, the story was changing. He closed the box of pills and whispered quietly to himself. 10 more days. Then he looked down at his legs and said something he had not said in a long time. Don't fail me now. Because in 10 days, he was not just walking into a wedding. He was walking into a battle. 9 days before the wedding, the house began to feel like a place where everyone was smiling too much. People shook his hand carefully, spoke to him slowly, and always stood instead of sitting when they talked to him. Like he was fragile glass that might break if they relaxed too much. Investors came to visit and told him not to worry about the company. Board members told him to focus on his health. Friends told him Sophia was an angel for staying by his side through such a difficult time. An angel. He sat in his wheelchair and listened to them praise the woman who had been slowly poisoning his legs, and he realized something important. A good lie does not look like a lie. A good lie looks like kindness. That afternoon, his lawyer came again, using the back entrance like always. They met in the study with the door closed. Everything is ready, the lawyer said, placing a folder on the desk. The video is clear. The financial trail is clear. The doctor's report is clear. Legally, what she did is fraud, financial manipulation, and intentional bodily harm. And the board? He asked. They will all be at the wedding, the lawyer said. When you stand up and we present the evidence, the board will have no choice but to remove her from any temporary authority immediately, especially if investors are present. No one will want to be associated with a scandal like this. He nodded slowly. Good. The lawyer looked at him carefully. There's one more thing, he said. Are you sure you can stand long enough? You don't have to walk far, but you need to stand. That moment is everything. He was quiet for a moment. I can stand, he said, and I can walk. The lawyer looked surprised. Walk? Yes, he said. Not like before. Not yet. But enough. The lawyer smiled slightly. Then she made one big mistake. What mistake? He asked. She gave you time, the lawyer said. If she had moved faster, she might have won. After the lawyer left, he went to the backyard again. The girl was there, sitting on the stone path, drawing in her notebook. She looked up when she heard the wheelchair. 9 days, he said. She nodded. Then today we walk farther. He stood up and began walking along the path again. His steps were still slow, but they were more stable now. The shaking was less violent. His legs still felt weak, but they no longer felt empty. He walked past the tree this time. 10 steps, 12, 15. He stopped and held onto the garden wall, breathing hard. You are walking now, she said. Yes, he replied. I am. He turned and carefully walked back toward the bench. When he sat down, he looked at his legs and shook his head slightly. For months, I thought my life was over, he said. But the truth was, someone was just pressing pause on my life. She sat beside him quietly. Do you hate her? The girl asked after a moment. He thought about that question carefully. No, he said finally. I don't hate her. Why not? She asked. Because hate is heavy, he said. And I need all my strength to stand. The girl nodded slowly, like she understood. That evening, something unexpected happened. He was in the hallway near the stairs when he heard her voice in the living room. She was on the phone, and she sounded different. Not soft and caring, not warm and gentle. Her voice was sharp, impatient. I told you already, she said quietly but angrily. After the wedding, everything transfers. The board will follow my recommendation once the doctors confirm he's permanently disabled. I just need a little more time. He stopped moving and stayed very still, listening. No, she continued. He doesn't suspect anything. He can barely stand. He still thinks the medication is helping. Just make sure the documents are ready. He felt something cold move through his chest again. But this time it did not feel like fear. It felt like certainty. He rolled quietly back to his room before she could see him. That night, he did not look at the pillbox or the documents. He looked at his legs. Then he slowly stood up beside the bed. No bench, no wall, just the bed beside him in case he fell. He stood there, alone in the room, in the quiet, his legs shaking but holding. For my life, he said quietly to himself. He took one step forward, then another. Slow, unsteady, but real. He walked 5 steps in his bedroom, then turned and sat down on the bed, breathing hard, his heart pounding. 9 days, he thought. 9 days to learn how to walk into a room where everyone thinks you are broken, and show them you are not. 7 days before the wedding, the house began to feel like a countdown clock that only he could hear. Every conversation, every flower delivery, every phone call, every fitting for his suit, all of it felt like it was moving towards something much bigger than a wedding. Everyone else saw a ceremony. He saw a deadline. That morning, she came into his room with the pills again, smiling, calm, perfect. Only 1 week left, she said. Are you excited? He looked at her and smiled slightly. I am, he said. It's going to be a big day. She handed him the pills and the water. He took them, pretended to swallow, and handed the glass back. I've been thinking, she said, sitting down across from him. After the wedding, we should sell the smaller office in Portland. You won't be traveling anymore, and it will make things simpler. Less stress for you. Less stress for you. She had a way of turning every decision into something that sounded like care. We'll see, he said calmly. Let's get through the wedding first. She smiled and stood up, walking behind him and gently squeezing his shoulders. You don't have to worry about anything, she said softly. I'll take care of everything now. He didn't respond. He just watched her reflection in the mirror as she walked out of the room. I'll take care of everything now. That sentence used to make him feel safe. Now it sounded like a threat. That afternoon in the backyard, he didn't start from the bench. He stood up from the wheelchair and began walking immediately. Slow steps along the stone path. 1 step, another, another. He walked past the tree again, past the garden chair, all the way to the end of the path near the fence. 20 steps. He stopped there, breathing hard, but he was still standing. You walked very far today, she said. Not far enough, he replied. At the wedding, I can't look like I just learned how to walk yesterday. I have to look like a man who is getting better, not a miracle. A recovery. She nodded. Then you should practice walking like it is normal, not like it is a secret. He turned and slowly walked back toward the bench. 7 days, he said. My lawyer will give a signal during the ceremony. The video and the documents will already be with the board members. When I stand up, that's when everything changes. He sat down and looked at his legs. Are you scared? She asked again. He thought for a moment. I'm not scared of her anymore, he said. I'm scared of how close I came to disappearing. She didn't speak. For 6 months, he continued, I slowly disappeared from my own life. First, I stopped running the company. Then I stopped signing my own papers. Then I stopped choosing where I go. Then I stopped deciding what I take. Then I stopped standing. Step by step, I disappeared, and I didn't even see it happening. He looked at her and said quietly, That's how it happens to a lot of people, I think. Not all at once, just one decision at a time, until your life belongs to someone else. She sat very still, listening. My grandpa says, she replied softly, a cage doesn't always have bars. Sometimes it has very comfortable pillows. He looked at her and smiled slowly. Your grandpa should write a book. That evening, he had dinner with 2 board members who came to the house to check on his health. They sat at the dining table while she served food and wine, playing the role perfectly. You should really think about stepping back for a year. One of the board members said kindly, focus on recovery. Let her handle things for a while. The company will be fine. He nodded slowly. I appreciate that, he said. It means a lot that you're all thinking about me. She placed her hand gently on his shoulder. He needs rest, she said softly. The doctors are very clear about that. The board members nodded with sympathy. As he sat there, listening to them discuss his life like he wasn't fully in the room, he realized something important. They weren't bad people. They were just seeing the story she had written for them. A sick man, a loving fiancé, a temporary transition of power, a romantic wedding before an uncertain future. It was a perfect story. If he didn't stand up in 7 days, that story would become permanent. That night, in his bedroom, he practiced again. Standing, balancing, walking from the bed to the window, from the window to the door, over and over again. At one point, His legs gave out and he had to grab the wall to keep from falling. He stood there, breathing hard, his forehead resting against the wall. 7 days, he whispered to himself. He pushed himself up again and took another step, then another, slowly, painfully, but moving. He looked at his reflection in the dark window, a man standing alone in a room, practicing how to walk in secret in his own house. "For my life," he said quietly again, because in 7 days, he would not just be walking into a wedding, he would be walking back into his own life. 5 days before the wedding, the house was filled with flowers, white flowers everywhere, on the dining table, on the staircase, near the windows, even in the hallway outside his bedroom. Roses, lilies, orchids. The air smelled sweet and heavy, almost too sweet, like something trying too hard to be beautiful. From the outside, it looked like a celebration. From the inside, it felt like a countdown. That morning, she came into his room with the pills again, just like always. Her routine had never changed in 6 months. Not once. 5 more days, she said with a soft smile. "Are you ready?" He looked at her and nodded. "I am." She handed him the pills. He put them in his mouth, drank water, pretended to swallow. She watched, satisfied, then walked to the closet to check his suit. "I had your wedding suit adjusted," she said. "It's tailored so you'll be comfortable sitting for a long time." Sitting for a long time. He watched her back as she spoke, and for a moment he wondered if she would still sound so calm if she knew that every step she took around that room was borrowed time. "Thank you," he said. She turned and smiled at him. "I just want everything to be perfect for you." Perfect. After she left, he went to the bathroom, spat the pills into the sink, and watched them dissolve. The white powder swirled into the water and disappeared. 5 days, he thought. That afternoon in the backyard, he didn't bring the wheelchair all the way to the bench. He left it a few feet away and stood up on his own. "Today we walk without stopping," he said. She looked at him carefully. "How far?" He looked at the long stone path, then at the garden, then at the back fence. "To the fence," he said. It was the longest distance yet. He started walking. Slowly, carefully, focusing on balance, on breathing, on each step touching the ground firmly. His legs still trembled, but now they trembled like tired muscles, not like dead weight. Halfway there, he stopped for a second, breathing hard. "Do you want to sit?" she asked. He shook his head. "No. If I sit, I start thinking. If I start thinking, I start remembering how easy it is to sit and let someone else run your life." He took another step, then another. When he finally reached the fence, he put his hand on it and closed his eyes for a moment. "I can do this," he said quietly. "I can walk in there." She nodded. "Yes, you can." He turned and looked back at the house. From this distance, the house looked large and beautiful and peaceful. No one looking at it would ever imagine what had been happening inside those walls. "For months," he said slowly, "I thought that house was protecting me because I was weak." He looked down at his legs, but the truth was, I was getting weaker because of that house. They walked back slowly, step by step, until he reached the wheelchair again. This time, when he sat down, it felt different. Not like defeat, like strategy. That evening, his lawyer called. "Everything is ready," the lawyer said. "The board has been told there will be an important announcement at the wedding. They don't know what it is yet, but they will all be there. The video is prepared. The financial documents are prepared. The doctor is ready to testify if needed." "And security?" he asked. "We will have people there," the lawyer said. "Once the evidence is shown, she won't be able to leave quietly." He was quiet for a moment. "Good," he said. "There's one more thing," the lawyer added. "When you stand up, don't rush. Stand slowly. Let everyone see it. That moment will be more powerful than any document." After the call ended, he sat alone in the dark for a long time. He thought about the accident, the hospital, the first cane, the walker, the chair, the pills, the papers he signed without reading because he was in pain and trusted the person sitting next to his bed. He thought about how easy it is to destroy a man if you are patient. You don't need a gun. You don't need a knife. You just need time, paper, and the right story. Later that night, He stood in his bedroom again and walked from the bed to the door, from the door to the window, again and again, until his legs felt like fire. When he finally sat down, he looked at his reflection in the mirror across the room. "You almost disappeared," he said quietly to the man in the mirror. The man in the mirror looked tired, older, thinner than he remembered, but the man in the mirror was standing, and that changed everything. 5 days, he thought again. 5 days to walk into a room where everyone thinks you are broken. 5 days to change the story. 5 days to stand up in front of the woman who tried to erase you and let the truth stand in your place. 3 days before the wedding, the house no longer sounded like a home. It sounded like an event hall. Voices echoed through the rooms. Workers moved furniture. Boxes of decorations were opened and closed, and the wedding planner spoke loudly about timing, music cues, and where everyone should stand. Everywhere he looked, people were preparing for a moment they believed would be romantic and beautiful. Only he knew it would be a moment of truth. That morning, when she came into his room with the pills, she looked happier than usual. 3 days, she said, smiling as she handed him the glass of water. "Can you believe it? In 3 days, we'll be married." He looked at her, took the pills, and pretended to swallow again. He had become very good at pretending. "Yes," he said. 3 days. She sat down beside him on the bed and adjusted the blanket over his legs. "After the wedding," she said softly, "everything will be different. You won't have to worry about the company anymore. The board already agrees that you should rest for at least a year. I'll handle everything. You just focus on getting better." The board already agrees, so she had already spoken to them. Already prepared the next step. Already built the next part of the cage. He looked at her and asked quietly, "And what if I don't get better?" She took his hand and smiled in that same gentle way. "Then I'll still be here," she said. "In sickness and in health." He nodded slowly. "You're very loyal." She squeezed his hand. "I love you." He looked at her for a long moment, then smiled back slightly. "I know," he said. When she left the room, his smile disappeared immediately. "In sickness and in health," he repeated quietly to himself. "You just forgot to mention that you were planning the sickness." That afternoon, in the backyard, he walked farther than ever before. He didn't start from the bench. He stood up from the wheelchair and began walking immediately along the stone path. Past the tree, past the garden chair, all the way to the fence. Then he kept going, turning slowly and walking back again. 20 steps, 30 steps. By the time he reached the bench again, his legs were shaking badly. But he was still standing. "You are walking like a normal person now," she said. "Not normal," he replied, breathing hard. "But enough." He sat down and looked at the house again. "Today, she told me the board already agreed that I should step back after the wedding," he said. "She's already telling them the story. That I'm too sick. That I need rest. That she will take care of everything." The girl was quiet for a moment. "Then the wedding is not the end of her plan," she said. "It is the beginning." "Yes," he said. "That's why the wedding is where we stop her." He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. "My lawyer said something yesterday," he continued. "He said most people think power is money, but real power is control over decisions. Who signs? Who approves? Who speaks? Who is believed?" He looked at his legs. "For 6 months, I had money," he said, "but I had no power. Because I was in that chair, and she was standing." The girl nodded slowly. "But in 3 days," he said quietly, "that changes." They practiced walking again until the sun began to go down and the backyard grew cold. When he finally sat back in the wheelchair, he was exhausted, but his eyes were clear. That evening, something happened that confirmed everything. He was in the hallway again when he heard her voice in the study. The door was not fully closed. "After the ceremony," she was saying on the phone, "we'll move quickly. The guardianship filing is ready. With the medical reports and the board recommendation, it will be approved fast. He won't fight it. He's too tired. He just wants peace now." He felt his hands slowly curl into fists on the wheelchair arms. Too tired. He rolled quietly back down the hallway before she came out. That night, he didn't go to the backyard. He stayed in his room and practiced walking there, from the bed to the window, from the window to the door, again and again, like a man rehearsing for the most important performance of his life. At one point, he stopped in the middle of the room, standing without holding anything, just balancing on his own 2 legs. 3 days, he thought. 3 days ago, I was a man in a wheelchair. 3 days from now, I stand up in front of everyone. He walked to the mirror and looked at himself standing there in the quiet room. They thought the chair made me weak, he said quietly to his reflection. He stood there a little straighter. But the chair taught me something, he continued. He looked into his own eyes in the mirror. It taught me exactly who was trying to take my life. 2 days before the wedding, the house was no longer just busy, it was loud, bright, and full of people who believed they were preparing for a celebration. A white tent had been set up in the garden. Rows of chairs were arranged facing a small stage covered in flowers. Electric lights were being tested even though it was still morning. Workers carried boxes, adjusted fabric, tested microphones. Everything was becoming real. He sat near the window in his wheelchair, watching them build the place where everything would end, or begin. She walked into the room with a folder in her hand and a smile on her face. "They're setting up the stage," she said. "Do you want to see?" "It's beautiful," he nodded. "Take me outside." She pushed his wheelchair slowly through the glass doors and onto the patio. The workers nodded politely to him, some of them smiling with sympathy, like people do when they see someone they believe has lost something important. He looked at the stage. White flowers, white chairs, white carpet leading up the small steps. He studied those steps very carefully. 3 steps up to the stage. He said nothing, but in his mind he counted them again. 1, 2, 3. "You'll come up from this side," she said, pointing to a small ramp beside the steps. "So it will be easy with the chair." "With the chair?" He nodded slowly. "You thought of everything." She smiled. "I told you. You don't have to worry about anything anymore." He looked at the stage again and imagined something different. Not the ramp. The steps. "Can we go closer?" he asked. "Of course," she said, pushing him closer to the stage so the wedding planner could show them where the officiant would stand, where the photographer would be, where they would say their vows. As the planner talked, he looked at the steps again and imagined his feet on them. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. "Perfect, right?" the planner said. "Yes," he replied quietly. "Perfect." That afternoon, in the backyard, he told the girl about the stage. 3 steps, he said. "Not many. But in front of everyone, it will feel like a mountain." She thought for a moment. "Then we practice steps," she said. They went to the stone path where there were 3 low garden steps near the side of the house. "Today," she said, "you don't just walk. You climb." He stood at the bottom of the small steps and looked down at his legs. "If I fall, this will be a very bad plan," he said. "If you fall," she replied calmly, "you stand again. That is the plan." He placed his hand on the railing and lifted his foot onto the first step. His leg trembled hard as he pushed his weight up. For a moment, he felt like he might collapse, but then he was up. First step. He stood there, breathing slowly. "Good," she said. "Now the second." The second step was harder. His leg shook badly, and he had to use both hands on the railing. But he pushed and lifted himself again. Second step. By the time he reached the third step, his legs were burning, but he forced himself up. Third step. He stood there at the top, breathing hard, looking down at the steps he had just climbed. "That's it," she said. "That's the stage." He nodded slowly. "That's the stage." He carefully walked back down, step by step, then sat on the stone bench, exhausted but smiling. 2 days, he said. She nodded. 2 days. He looked at her and said quietly, "Do you know what the strangest part of all this is?" "What?" she asked. "For months, I thought I was fighting to get my legs back," he said. "But now I understand. I was fighting to get my life back. The legs are just part of it." She didn't say anything, but she nodded slowly. That evening, inside the house, there was a small dinner rehearsal with a few close friends and 2 board members who had arrived early. They all sat in the living room, talking, drinking wine, laughing. She sat beside him on the couch, her hand resting lightly on his arm like always. One of the board members looked at him and said kindly, "We're all very happy you found someone who takes such good care of you. Not many people would stay after something like this." He smiled politely. "Yes," he said, "I'm very lucky." She squeezed his arm gently and leaned her head slightly toward him, playing the role perfectly. But as everyone talked and laughed, he looked around the room and realized something important. Every person in that room believed a story, and in 2 days, he was going to change that story in less than 1 minute. That night, in his bedroom, he didn't practice walking on flat ground. He practiced standing, then stepping up onto a small wooden box his lawyer had quietly brought that morning. 1 step up, balance, step down, again, until his legs felt like they were on fire and sweat ran down his back. He sat on the edge of the bed, breathing hard, looking at the wooden box in front of him. 3 steps, he said quietly. Then he looked at his legs and said, "Don't fail me now." Because in 2 days, those 3 steps were not just steps, they were the distance between losing everything and taking his life back. The morning of the wedding arrived quietly. For a house that had been full of noise, voices, music rehearsals, and footsteps for days, that morning felt strangely calm. The sky over Seattle was gray, the kind of soft gray that made everything look still, like the world was holding its breath. He woke up earlier than usual and did not call anyone. He just sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, looking at his legs, his hands resting on his knees. "This is the day," he said quietly to himself. There was a knock on the door, and she walked in wearing a white robe, her hair already done, her face calm and beautiful and confident. She was smiling the smile he had seen every day for months, the smile that had fooled doctors, friends, board members, and almost destroyed his life. "Today," she said softly, "you become my husband." He looked at her and nodded. "Today," he said, "everything changes." She walked over and handed him the pills and the glass of water one last time. "Just for today," she said, "so you don't feel too tired." He took the pills, put them in his mouth, drank the water, and pretended to swallow, just like every other day. She leaned down and kissed his forehead. "I'll see you at the ceremony," she said. "Don't be nervous. I'll be right beside you." When she left the room, he walked to the bathroom, spat the pills into the sink, and watched them dissolve for the last time. "No more," he said quietly. He put on the suit that had been tailored for a man who would spend the ceremony sitting down. Then he stood up slowly, adjusted the jacket, and looked at himself in the mirror. For a moment, he did not see the man from the marathon photos or the man from the wheelchair. He saw a man who had been very close to losing everything and was still here. "You walk in," he said to his reflection. "You stand. You tell the truth, and you don't sit down again." Outside, guests were arriving. Cars pulled up one after another. Men in suits, women in formal dresses, board members, investors, friends, cameras, laughter, music, the perfect wedding. He sat in the wheelchair and let the driver push him toward the garden where the white chairs were filled with people. At the end of the aisle, the stage waited with its 3 steps and white flowers. She was already there, standing near the officiant, beautiful in a white dress, smiling as guests turned to look at her. Then the music changed, and everyone turned to look at him. This was the moment in the story where the broken man is pushed down the aisle to marry the woman who stayed with him. The driver began to push the wheelchair forward. The wheels rolled slowly over the white carpet. He could feel every pair of eyes on him. He could hear people whispering softly, sympathetic voices, emotional voices. "So brave, so sad, so beautiful. She's an angel." The wheelchair stopped at the front, beside the ramp that led up to the stage. The officiant smiled kindly. "We are gathered here today." "Wait," he said. His voice was calm, but it carried across the quiet garden. "I need 1 minute," he said. People shifted in their seats. The officiant looked confused. She looked at him, her smile still there, but her eyes had changed slightly. He placed his hands on the arms of the wheelchair. "For 6 months," he said, his voice steady. He pushed down on the arms of the chair and slowly stood up. At first, there was no sound at all, just silence, the kind of silence that feels like the air has disappeared. He stood there, not perfectly straight, not perfectly strong, but standing on his own two legs. You could hear people gasping. Someone dropped something. A chair moved suddenly. He looked at her. Her face had gone completely white. For 6 months, he continued, I thought I was getting sick. I thought I was losing my legs. I thought I was unlucky. He took one step forward, then another, slow steps toward the stage. But the truth, he said, is that I was not getting sick. He reached the steps and stopped for a second, looking down at them. 1 step, he said quietly, almost to himself, and stepped up. 2 steps. He stepped up again, his legs shaking but holding. 3 steps. He stepped onto the stage and turned to face everyone. The truth, he said, looking out at the crowd, is that someone was making me sick. At that moment, his lawyer stood up from the front row and nodded to someone near the sound system. A large screen behind the stage turned on. The video from the kitchen appeared. Clear, undeniable, her hands pouring pills from one bottle into another. Gasps spread through the crowd like wind through leaves. Then the financial documents appeared. Company shares, shell companies, her name hidden behind layers of paperwork. Then the doctor's report. The pills, the muscle relaxants, the long-term damage. He looked at the crowd, then at the board members, then back at her. I was not in a wheelchair because I was too weak to stand, he said quietly. I was in a wheelchair because I trusted the wrong person to help me. She stared at him, unable to speak, her perfect story collapsing in front of everyone. He took a slow breath and said the last thing he needed to say. You didn't try to take my company, he said. You didn't try to take my money. He looked her straight in the eyes. You tried to take my life. The garden was completely silent, and for the first time in 6 months, he was the one standing, and she was the one with nowhere to go. This story carries a quiet but powerful lesson. Sometimes the greatest danger in our lives does not come from strangers, but from the people we trust the most. Evil does not always arrive with violence. Sometimes it arrives with kindness, patience, and a smile, taking away our freedom one small decision at a time. The story reminds us that power is not just money or success, but the ability to make our own choices and stand on our own feet. It also teaches us that we should never ignore small doubts, because the truth often whispers before it shouts. And finally, the story shows that courage does not always mean fighting others. Sometimes courage simply means standing up, telling the truth, and taking your life back before it is too late. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.